Imagine an ancient world where you have just killed two gods. You are now forced to complete labors to atone for your sins. Killing the mythical Neiman lion, facing the unkillable Hydra, and finally, facing down the Dark Lord that rules in the god's stead, whilst building an empire to rival that of the ancient Greek city-states. This is surviving 100 days in ancient Greece. Let's put these mythical monsters to the test. As I fell into a brand new world, I was cushioned by the seabed below me. I decided to explore to see what this ancient world had to offer. But, as I approached what seemed to be a village, I saw a zombie villager, which was quite strange considering the world had only begun a few moments before. There had been no night cycles. It was strange, but I decided to explore the village anyway. Inside of the village, I tried to free some livestock, but they seemed to love their captivity. Inside of the building, I found a lot of coal and some other basic resources. It seemed like a blacksmith type of building. Whilst venturing out of the village, I noticed a house that had been chopped in half. And it could only make me think, zombie villagers, chopped in half houses? Something was going on here, but I didn't know what it was yet. Further my suspicions, while I was exploring, I found a temple-like structure. These seemed to be everywhere. Who are they worshipping? I knew I had to get a start on my 12 labors if I wanted to complete them all, the first of which being the Nemean lion, one of the fiercest beasts that had ever roamed the lands. But before venturing out to kill him, or at least attempt to, I wanted to make a base. I saw a giant mountain and I decided that would be a cool spot, so after gathering some resources and looking up to the very top, I decided to build a staircase all the way up. Eventually, after some time, I made my way all the way to the top of the mountain and I began clearing it out. I built myself a small house, and then it was time to go to the mines. If I wanted to face the Nemean lion, I was going to need some sort of armor. I then used a glider made from cowhide to glide off of the mountain. This would be much easier to get down from now. However, getting back up, we'd have to solve later. I then ventured deep into the mines, and whilst mining, I found a weird redstone contraption that emitted light on a frequency symbol. I had no idea what this meant, but I decided just to pass it by for now. It was strange because as I was mining, I found scattered chests here and there with loot inside. Now I was told if I drink a potion of luck and then open a chest, I'm supposed to get extremely lucky. Ah, so this is what luck looks like, eh? I then found a weird creature I had never seen before. Something in this world was not right, and I was going to have to figure out what it was before it was too late. I then went out to find a dark forest, home to the Nemean lion. I knew this battle could mark the end of the 100 days, but I decided to push through for now. As the battle raged and the lion pounced, I fought back, and, throughout the long battle, defeated the lion. I went to inspect what was in the chest that he guarded, to which I found an ancient chest piece. This was going to come in handy. It hit me. It hit me. No, 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 run, 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 run. The night should have been an adrenaline boost for the next day, as killing a lion meant I had a chance in this world. But seeing whatever those monsters were set a grim light over the next day. I had never, in all of my time in all these worlds, ever seen a creature like that. Nonetheless, I found the ruins of an old castle, and inside of the chests I found an ancient battle axe and some assorted ores. This would help me get started on an early army inside of the game. I then ventured into the forest, looking for more to discover inside of this strange new world. I then found what seemed to be an ancient graveyard and went inside to see what loot it may hold. But as I approached, I heard a strange noise, and then a figure with a scythe or some sort of weapon emerged. He withered me and did a lot of damage, so I began to run. I would need soldiers to take this place on. I found some undead and I killed them. And then, whilst gathering some resources to construct a personal guard, I was attacked by some strange sort of fox. I began to realize it did a lot of damage and I started to run. I used the water to my advantage and was able to kill it. Something or someone seemed to be after me. I then created 2 guardsmen and ran back to the graveyard, but the Reaper figure was nowhere to be found. I looted the main building and I began to investigate what was around. I found under all the black carpets they were either chests or spawners. However, under one of the graves I saw a ladder. I thought to myself,
A ladder and a graveyard. Not suspicious, so I plunged down to see what was inside. And inside I found even more undead, but they were well armored and well formatted. I took them on using the ladder to my advantage. What were they guarding? I looted the main hall and went farther in. I found even more undead, and I spawned in my guard. We fought as a unit and destroyed the undead. However, we lost one of the men. As I went deeper into the dungeon, I found necromancers. I threw my poison potion at them, and accidentally hit my own man. I saw a coffin, and I wondered what loot was inside, so I tried to open it. An evil, half-man, half-undead creature emerged and began to chase me, and killed my other soldier. I sprinted back to the ladder, and he chased me to it. However, being dead for so long caused him some allergies to the sun, and he perished in less than a PogChamp way. I then went back in and picked up the coffin because I thought it looked cool, and then ventured back into the forest. It was time now to start a base. I then arrived back home and began building some small buildings to start a colony. There was a flat plateau on the mountaintop that would fit perfectly and that was highly defensible. I placed down a town hall and then a builder's hut. I then ventured off the mountaintop using my glider once again. I wanted to go and find more of those strange creatures to see what they were, and whilst adventuring, I found more of them. They looked hideous and probably would have killed me if I'd stuck around, so I decided to leave, but I would definitely come back later. I then began to work on a bridge that wrapped around the mountainside to connect my home to the new colony. I realized that if I wanted to wage war on some of the surrounding empires, I would need cavalry. However, in the mountains, horses were quite hard to find, so I thought it would be a good idea to see if I could sneak into the empire beneath the mountain and steal some of theirs. I brought my guard with me in case I got caught. However, I got too close, and what seemed like hundreds of soldiers began chasing me, and I quickly retreated. I'd need to find a better way to get some horses. After grabbing the saddle I had found and some horse armor, I plunged myself off the cliff again and began searching for some horses. Beneath me, I saw massive destruction of some forts nearby. Something had been here. I didn't want to think if they were looking for me or not. I found some horses in the woods and spent the next bit taming them. I then rode them to the mountainside. As I had no way to get them up yet, I carved out a small hole in the mountain, and I added some spruce doors and then drove the horses inside. This would protect them for the next little while. I grabbed one more horse as morning broke and brought it to the other one and then had the animals breed. I then made my way back up the mountain and went to take a look at what had been progressing. Some of the smaller houses were being built, but the town center hadn't been started yet. And dove off the mountain to continue on my labors. It was now time to go and find the Hydra. Boat, I then traveled and I found an island. This must be the place.
Oh my goodness, what is this place? My calculations are correct. Hydra should be somewhere around here.
And then I spotted it. I knew he'd be no easy foe to battle, so I prepared myself and began the insult. However, I found these strange ghost-like entities that came out to kill me. I killed them and began moving closer to a seemingly dormant Hydra. I drank my potions and began using my bow. However, shot after shot, it grew even more heads. As I got closer, it poisoned me. I remembered that the only way to kill it was to light it on fire. I headed back to shore as morning broke, as I was going to need fire to kill this thing. So I went into the mines, grabbed some iron for a bucket, and picked up some lava. I then headed back to the island, and with no pickaxe, began pillaring up beside the beast to drop lava on it. And then, the battle began. The fire and my sword working in unison to defeat one of the most powerful entities on this earth. This Hydra would no longer scourge these lands. That is if I didn't die in this battle. The battle continued and raged, but eventually, after a hard-fought one, I defeated the Hydra. This was my second labor completed, and even though I felt a certain peace now, I knew there was many more and many more dangerous ones in the future.
What is this place? Looks like some sort of... I don't want to go through that thing. This was sort of ruins, or... a castle used to be here or something.
Explored the ruins next to the Hydra's lair. I realized that the Hydra did not destroy blocks. This ruin was not the fault of the Hydra, but another beast. For now, I didn't give much thought to it though, and I moved on. I arrived back home and began working on my empire some more. The town center was nearly complete. This was essential because once it was complete, the empire could begin expanding a lot faster. I wanted to begin working on my cavalry, so I decided to build a bridge to the adjacent mountain beside me and begin carving it out. I wanted to build a stable up there for them. I plunged back down to go and gather some supplies to continue building the stable. However, whilst on the ground, I heard explosions, and I found myself unable to move. After a short time, I was able to run. I then went into the forest, gathered some wood, and returned to the top of the mountain. I began working on the outline for the stable, down into the colony, and set up a mine for the builders to construct. I was going to focus early on mining so I could passively gather some iron for my armies when I had to form them later. I knew I had to begin adventuring soon and continuing my labors, but I wanted to get the horses to safety as they were vulnerable to the tribes around me at the base of the mountain. I began scoping out the sides to see if there was any way up, but there was none to be found. This was good and bad, because although it kept my enemies out, it also allowed me to not be able to transport anything large to the top of the mountain. But then I remembered a trick. Mounting one of the guardsmen on a horse would cause them to merge into one entity, allowing me to pick it up. I am Hercules, after all. I carried my horses up and rode them into the new stable. Now time for my next labor. I knew Pan's Labyrinth had to be the next one. This dark and dreary place of evil would be the first real test I had to do, as it was a combination of wit and muscle. But before leaving, I made some guards and placed patrols around my colony to prevent barbarians from sacking the houses whilst I was gone. I then decided to have some fun when I jumped off the cliff top. I wanted to collect some more food from the nearby farmer. However, a barbarian didn't appreciate it. I killed him, and all of a sudden, a man in a cauldron began attacking me with a bow. This is truly a strange empire. I then stole all their wheat. I knew the Pan's Labyrinth would cause me to go without access to new food for a while. I then tried to tame this strange-looking horse, but he didn't seem to be tameable. However, I found my old horse and used him to do a quick farming raids. Arrows hailed from all directions, but I was able to dodge them. But after a while and a consistent barrage, my horse was shot and killed. I grabbed the remaining wheat and a ton of food whilst being shot, and then ran away with more arrows in me than I care to count.
There it is, the entrance to Pan's Labyrinth. Oh boy, who says we come out of this one alive?
And then I found it, the entrance to Pan's Labyrinth. I began traversing the steps to the base of the labyrinth. However, it had 4 directions to go. I picked my path and began looking through the vast tunnels. I knew if I picked the wrong one, I'd be down here for hours. I had no idea how to navigate this.
Everything just looks the same down here. You get into another room and it's just a mirror of the other room. Okay, actually, that's new.
Room after room, I finally began to make some sort of progress. The carpet seemed to run into a wall, so I mined through it, and I met the undead with strange armor on. I fought the zombies and eventually broke their spawner. I knew the demon that rules the labyrinth would protect Pandora's box and would not make it easy on me. I found even more undead, and I retreated back. I allowed them to fight each other, and I used the time to break the spawner. I then left as I wanted to grab a bucket of lava before venturing further, as the clusters of mobs would be just too much for me.
So what are these?
As the clusters of mobs would just be too much for me if I didn't have one. When I made it back down, I found a headless skeleton riding a spider. What is going on down here? Something evil was definitely at work. Through the maze I continued, slowly delving farther and farther into what seemed like the abyss. I could feel the strength of the demon increasing, but where was he hiding? I continued battling the undead and eventually found the stairs down to the bottom. However, it was guarded by a troll with some sort of log as a weapon. I slowly took him out so I could use the stairs he was guarding. I fell into a cluster of spawners and monsters and almost got thrown into lava. It was almost the end of everything. I clung to the edge, but I realized I needed to kill the remaining skeleton if I didn't want to get killed. But he fell into the lava, and I made my way back to break the spawners. And then I found the demon. He would kill me if he hit me twice, so I had to be very cautious. I used the fact that he couldn't get out to my advantage, but it was still very dangerous. But, all of a sudden, when he was nearly dead, the wall broke. I ran for my life, knowing that this may be the end. I then turned and used my bow to make the final shot, and I killed him. If this demon hadn't been trapped in his own lair, I would have surely died. He dropped a skull, and when I broke the chest, I found it. Pandora's box, and a strange ancient sword. I grabbed both and began navigating out of the labyrinth. I used the Mirror of Return to teleport me back to my spawn after being chased by more evil entities. I knew the Temple of Medusa would be my next task, but I wanted to work on my empire more and begin claiming more territory. I started out by clearing out my base a little more into the mountain, and I built an enchanting area. After enchanting some tools, I headed to the village. I built another builder's hut, as I wanted to expand my empire in this direction after it was built. I then placed down another house, as it's essential to raise soldiers in. To create more population, you need more housing to actually have them. I then returned and enchanted my axe, as I would need wood for the next project. Whilst exploring, I found a mystical forest, and I decided to grab some wood from it. I found some ruins, and I ventured closer, but I was attacked by men with cloaks and axes, witches, and the undead, and spiders began repelling me from reaching the center of this room. This made me even more eager to discover what was inside. I slowly made my way closer and closer, killing the witches and the cloaked men as I went. Eventually, I killed everyone, and collected the chest covered by the cobblestone in the middle.
When I arrived home, one of the first things I did was breed more horses. I knew I would need a large cavalry if I was going to defend my base later. I then went down and upgraded my mines. My mines needed to be at max capacity so I could get the most iron I could to make as many armor sets as weapons as I could possibly make.
I used spruce wood in combination with the blue wood I gathered to make the room inside of the mountain slightly hidden. This would be the place where I would stockpile my supplies and arm my men quickly in case of an attack. I then made a bunch of armor stands to display the armor so I had a visual count of how many sets I had. I went back and placed them all down, but I barely had any armor to put on them. I then began an adventure to begin equipping the room. As I began my search, I found the terrain was being even more wrecked below me. I then went into the mines and began mining to get a lot of supplies for the next few days. However, I began to realize that this was a very slow way of gathering supplies. If I wanted to outfit an entire army, I knew I was going to have to start raiding. So, after a short mining stint, I returned back to the surface, ready to conquer some more. I returned home, I smelted down all my ores from mining, and then enchanted my sword and got sharpness 4 on it. I constructed a bunch of armor as it was now time to raid. I needed every soldier I could get to defend my home and come with me. I began outfitting them with new armor I'd made and any tools I had. I didn't have enough to outfit them all, so I left behind the ones who didn't have enough armor. After some searching, I found a huge figure hidden in the northern lights, and explosions. I had no idea where they came from, but I headed to the local hut to sleep. However, that night, there was barbarians inside of it, and they rushed out at me. As I was being demolished, I ran. After killing them with my soldiers, I slew the blacksmith, and looted the house. I realized that the giant figure I had seen was a dragon. This was the dragon colony. And sure enough, they had a beast trapped nearby. I found a bunch of barbarians at a local tavern, so I shut the door. I looted the nearby farms to get a bit more food. I then went to a peak, and I found their storage center. Inside, there had to be a lot of armor, but I had to be very cautious. So I glided to the roof, and as I broke through, I saw some soldiers in there, so I spammed my own down, and I jumped down. After killing them, I was only left with a few men. Jumping down another ladder seemed very dangerous, but I spawned in my soldiers, and we began the attack. I noticed the next floor had some armor that I could equip my soldiers with that would give us a better chance. One of my men went down the ladder and was instantly killed. I looted the armor and the ender crystal. I realized there was an obsidian on the table down below, and I began to think if there was a way to get the crystal down there and get the men to clump up and then blow it up. I applied my affinity bow to one of my men,
and he took out a few of the barbarians from range, but the angle we were at was really bad, so he couldn't get too many. I began weighing the options, and I realized the best one was to clump the men up and try to use the crystal to kill them. I began bridging to see if I could get them into an entire clump around the table. I went outside and quickly grabbed some blocks, so after I placed the crystal, I could pillar back up. I then got back into the house and I glided down. I ran in circles and was able to place the crystal, but barely with any hearts left. The bauble I had on allowed me to have a second life at reduced hearts. By the end of it, I had 3 hearts, but the crystal was placed. I got the men to circle up around the crystal, and then took out my bow. I shot half a heart. Running through them would be very dangerous. In fact, it would kill me. However, in one of the chests, I found an invisibility potion. My only chance was to take all my armor off and walk through the most likely huge mob that was outside these gates. So, after collecting all the supplies, I drank it and opened the gate. As the men stood in awe as there was no one there, I snuck through them all and ran away. I then began gliding home with only half a heart. This was crazy dangerous. I found a small hut in the wild and I began making my way towards it. One stray shot from a skeleton and I was done. The child slammed the door on me, but I barged in anyway. I then slept. This regenerated my hearts back to normal. With no food, I looted the hay bales in the house to make some bread. I looted their crates, and I went on my way. Whilst adventuring, I found a house made of hay. Hey, would you look at that, I thought to myself. I borrowed some of it, and then shut the door on the way out. When I arrived back home, I began realizing my force was dwindling. All my men kept dying. I placed all new armor and tools in the armory. This would be enough for a small force. I then began the construction of a new bridge. I wanted to make guard towers along the tops of the mountains in case of an attack, so archers could hail on them. I also breeded the horses again. I made a small bridge into the top of a nearby mountain. I then placed another mine to gather even more iron for tools and armor. It was now time to begin my next labor. I began searching for Medusa, one of the final labors. And, after a while, there it was, the Temple of Medusa. As I approached, I heard an eerie voice, and I lowered my face so that she wouldn't turn me into stone. After gathering some courage, I began to rush in, head down. I placed my soldiers, and the attack began. And, after a while, defeated her. As I looked at her corpse, I was strangely pleased. But it came at a cost. One wrong move and we'd be turned to stone, just like this man. I then headed back home to complete the next labor. I sorted my items away and dove back down into the mines to gather some obsidian I'd need for a portal to the underworld. Beneath the depths there was a titan I had to defeat, and time was running out. So I gathered some obsidian and headed back to the surface. Whilst in the mines, I noticed a strange creature. As I approached, I heard a howl that was not from this part of the world, and I ran. But he began drawing me back, like in a bad dream, when you can't run. But I was able to move away and mine my way out. I had no idea what this creature was or how long it had been down here for, but I did not want to see it again. I began mining out a section of my base to build a nether portal in. I carved out a small section next to the stairs, and using dark abyss oak I had found from defeating the Nemean lion, I had made a dark themed room for the portal. I was about to go in when I noticed my XP bar and decided to enchant before heading into the deep depths. I enchanted my diamond armor and headed back to the portal. The underworld seemed almost quiet after the demise of Hades, but I knew danger still lurked. After some searching, there he was, the demon of the underworld.
Another foolish mortal, come to give me his soul. How kind of you. You think you could challenge me? Then step
I placed my men down and began the attack. His ranged attack would kill you within 6 seconds of being exposed. After my men brought him down, I rushed in for the final kill, and we killed him. I returned from the underworld with a warning from the Titan that an army was coming. I ran to my village, but I saw nothing. I then glided around the mountain and noticed a slope that could be climbed. This wasn't here before. As I looked around, I saw supply wagons and battering rams. As I got closer, an army rendered in. They were coming. It was time to prepare or die. There was only one pass they could come through to attack the Empire, so I knew I had to build a wall. Began creating bows for every piece of armor I could afford, and then preparing my men. We would need a lot of bowmen if we wanted to take a stand. I headed back to the pass with some stone brick and wood variants. I then mined out a little spot and began placing down my wall. I finished the wall and then added some last touches. I then placed down some ballistas on top. These shoot massive arrows and can repel groups of men. I then placed bowmen on top and began giving them posts at different points along the wall. Once they were positioned, I used my few TNT combined with pressure plates to make some sort of landmines that the enemy would need to cross. I then went to my mines and claimed the remaining iron that I had. I made more soldiers and rushed to my armory room. I knew the time was near. I began to gear my men up, soldier after soldier, chestplate after chestplate. It was now or never. I wish I had more time to prepare, but it was what it was. I gathered every soldier to behind the wall, and with bowmen at the ready, it was time. And then, there he was. I had no idea who this general was, just another fool looking for fame.
Have you come out to offer your surrender? Because if not, we have nothing to talk about. My armies will crash through your walls, and you will have no chance at any survival. Surrender, and I'll only kill you. Fight, and I'll kill you, and everybody else.
Our talks broke down, and then, all of a sudden, he grew to a massive human. I almost yelled. This was dark magic. As he approached, his army came in behind him. My landmines went off, and archers began hailing down arrows. I got my ballista and began firing. However, I couldn't figure out how to use the dumb thing, so I gave up. As they brought in the battering rams, my archers' angles wouldn't work anymore. I tried to draw them out so my archers could hit them. One of my archers fell and was immediately crushed. As the gate was crashing, I knew it was imminent that they would break through, so I jumped down with my men for the assault. Crash after crash we heard, but we were ready. And then, like a million splinters cascading all over, the walls came down. Every man rushed in, and I with them. This was our stand. This was our city. The fighting was fierce. Men were dropping on both sides, but the evils of the intruders were just too much. I knew I needed to protect the dragon egg, so I rushed back to the house and broke the bridge on my way. This wouldn't stop them for long, though. I grabbed the egg, and, whilst collecting some other supplies, they came in. I had no time to save my men. I tried to fight, but I knew it was just foolish, so I jumped and glided out. I knew who the Titan was that was responsible for this army. I knew I had to face him, and I would need ancient dragon armor to do so. And I knew the only dragon powerful enough to give me enough scales. So, I sought out, and I found the ice dragon.
We're so close. Come on, just a few more. Yes, brought him down.
I made a full set of armor, and then realized to make the sword, I'd need a wither bone. So I gathered some obsidian and headed into the underworld. After finding a fortress, I killed 2 skeletons, and one of them dropped the bone. I grabbed it and left. Time was running out, but eventually, I found the palace of the Dark Underlord, responsible for my empire's demise. Readied, I charged in.
And here he comes, the mortal that thinks himself a god. Well, mortal, take these items. I want this to be a fair fight. Once you enter these doors, you will never leave again. Now, come face me!
As I stared off into the abyss, I could only think, what was next?